I'm making this video to just show how I use Fab-Filter Multiband Expander for cleaning up sound effects. For demonstration, I've got this metal door. It's a donation box opening and closing I recorded with an MKH60 on the street. So fair amount of street noise. Here, I'll go ahead and play the raw file. No, it's not too bad. I honestly wouldn't clean this up too much typically, but say I wanted to throw this in a project and it doesn't make sense to have any road noise back there, or it's pretty naked in the mix and we want to knock that noise down a bit. So you can by all means use a denoiser like RX, isotope, spectral denoiser. However, I tend to find that I prefer the sound of an expander because I find that there's less artifacting. With that said, sometimes you'll get similar results, so I don't want to make it sound like this is the only way to do it. It's just my preferred way. So I just went ahead and duplicated that original file. We'll go ahead and mute that for now, that raw file. And firstly, let's go ahead and knock out, there's a resonating frequency in this recording, or rather that steady tone. So I went ahead and found that using just a EQ1 because I'm assuming most people have this. The way I found that, it's at 354, is I just, let's see, had this guy set at the yield bubble, and I searched around for it. So just kind of scanned the frequencies. Boom, and then you hear it, and then you knock it down with this guy. Okay, so we got that steady little tone out of there. I always recommend you do that before any denoising techniques. And then let's pull up Fab-Filter. So we got bada bing, Fab-Filter Pro Multiband, and let's see how it looks on here. So for demonstration purposes, let's go ahead and make a single band just so we see how this is working. And instead of compress mode, which is the default, we're going to go to expand. And we'll just go ahead and see how it's interacting right now just with default settings. Pulling the range down, so it's going to pull it down more. So we don't want this fluttering that's going on. What we need to do is set the threshold for this noise right here. So we'll go ahead and just select this traffic noise at the start. And I'm actually going to use the ratio to adjust how much it decides to let this threshold kick in. So we'll pull this down so it's not really moving much. And then I'm going to change, let's see how this sounds. So pretty harsh, a lot of artifacts right there that we don't like the sound of. So I'm going to let it just go ahead and play through, and I'm going to just adjust these settings so it sounds more natural to my ears. So let's go ahead and play it. Okay, right there, we're getting somewhere. We're still hearing a little bit of the traffic noise after the tail. So I can maybe tighten that up a little bit. There we go. But so this whole going to like full spectrum right now is pretty like catch-all, pretty brutal. So let's go ahead and break this up into different bands. So the way you do that is if you lift your mouse up here and you click right up here at that plus symbol, it's going to give you another set of bands. And so now we can kind of like hone in on the different frequencies we got. We'll just keep it simple and say like lows, and I'll break it off into another one. We'll have their mids, and then we'll have the highs, so to speak. So just by default, let's just go ahead and whack all these down to minus 30. So meaning when it's below the threshold, it's going to be knocking down the gain by 30 decibels. We can do the same technique as we did before on the noise at the start. Noise floor, so I'm just clicking on this middle band here. I'm going to raise the ratio, raise the attack, meaning it's going to be a slower attack. Because this material isn't super transient, I can get away with that. If I were doing punches or something, I'd definitely want this attack to be a lot faster. But because this material is a little bit slower, we can goose that a little bit more. And then lastly, our highs, which are so beautiful. We're going to adjust this threshold as such. Get that attack a little bit slower. Okay, so let's listen to this. Okay, not bad. However, I do notice that this low band is eating away at that nice juicy low end. So perhaps a little too aggressive. So let's play with that. Go back to that beginning sample. Now this is what I find when using the multiband expander is sometimes I'd like to use this expert panel mode. You go into here, click that, and you hit, currently it's set to be triggered by this bandwidth audio. And we could audition that and just hear what that's listening to. However, it may not react in time to get that nice low end. So what I do is I set it to this free. And what that does is instead of listening to just this band of frequencies, we can now move it to where the meat of that signal is. So let's move it, let's look at it, but I believe it's, yeah, we got a lot going on in the mid and highs. So now I have it set between 445 and 5,000. You don't have to be precise with this, but you just kind of analyze and look at it. And now we can see that this is still getting triggered, but hopefully when... There we go. Whereas if we move it back just to that lower end region like this, you could see it's expanding it. It's not expanding it enough, so we're losing a lot of that low end. So that's why moving it up here is nice, because it's going to respond better. And whenever that signal's present, it's going to make sure to let in that low end. So let's just like take a listen, see where we're at. And now let me just bypass this to listen to the original. Put it back on. So we're certainly losing a little bit in the high end, so I might want to back off on this a bit. Turning it back on. Maybe increase the release a little bit on both of these. You know, and this is for demonstration purposes. I'm really cranking this thing. I would normally not denoise my sound effects this much. or noise suppress, whatever you want to categorize this. Because the original recording, if I bypass everything, it sounds just fine, especially if you were to like edit the recording as such and just like do clever fades. The sound beef is really masking a lot of that noise, but for the sake of, say you wanted to master this out and use it in a sampler and not have to deal with that noise in the background, especially if you're doing a lot of layering of it, all that noise is going to compound. So yeah, and one thing I will note about the expanding technique that is a downside is that that noise is still in the recording, and where that can rear its head is, say I want to slow this down, that noise is still present in there, whereas a proper denoiser is actually going to sometimes do a better job of cleaning that out depending on your settings. But we can just go ahead and consolidate this, and I'm curious if we slow this down, if we hear any of this noise that I'm referring to. So now we've printed the effect. We'll go ahead and mute this guy and play this at half speed. Well, it's not bad. So, but I have found that if you have especially like very transient materials, say like, I don't know, button clicks or impacts, and there's a lot of noise in the background, you're going to hear that noise with the expanders, especially when you start to slow it down. But I'd say in real time playback, you normally don't discern that sort of noise. So as with any tool, you want to not overdo this. I'm really cranking it here for example purposes. And if I'm really ever trying to clean up a track, I'll typically do a little bit of Pro MB. I might do a little bit more of denoiser, like a RX. And for dialogue, I really prefer using expanders over denoisers. Again, I do use a little bit of both. But yeah, so anyways, that's the tutorial I got for now. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you're all doing well. And yeah, go make some fun sound effects.